Welcome. This presentation explores gamified education as a way to boost learning for students with executive function disorders. Over the next slides, I'll summarize evidence, practical strategies, and research gaps while highlighting how game mechanics can scaffold attention, task initiation, and working memory to make classroom learning more engaging and effective for learners with EFDs. Here we frame the problem and the proposed intervention. Students with executive function disorders struggle with organization, focus, and behavior in traditional classrooms, and gamified education uses game elements to increase motivation and task completion. The key takeaway is that tailored gamification shows promise, but we still need consistent evaluation and long-term studies to translate findings into classroom practice. The core rationale here is straightforward. EFDs impair organization, impulse control, and focus, while standard classrooms often miss these needs. Gamification offers solution directions like points, badges, and short challenges to motivate students, but designs must target inhibition, task initiation, and emotional control to be effective rather than using generic game overlays. We reviewed gamification specifically for EFD because the literature is fragmented. Many studies focus on neurotypical learners or mix executive training into broader gamification work. This review aims to consolidate evidence, identify game elements that target EFD impairments, and guide future research toward experiments that connect lab findings with real-world classroom IEPs. Our search followed PRISMA principles, scanning 9 major databases from PubMed to RxIV and Google Scholar to capture empirical studies on gamified education for executive function disorders. We excluded reviews and meta-analyses to focus on original research, used combined search terms for gamification and executive function, and included gray literature to broaden relevance and transparency. We organized studies across 5 analytical dimensions to capture breadth and relevance: gamification, neurodevelopmental disorders, executive function training, subject-specific applications, and intelligent tutoring systems. Inclusion focused on empirical English language studies of learners diagnosed or suspected to have EFDs, while excluding purely theoretical work or studies lacking explicit gamification elements. Study selection began with a large pool of records, narrowed by title and abstract screening, then full-text review to exclude studies without EFD focus or gamification detail. Quality assessment flagged risks such as small samples, reliance on self-report, limited non-digital approaches, and a concentration of studies in high-income countries that limits global generalizability. Research on gamified education for students with EFDs is rising. Only a couple of early studies existed pre-2015. Publications increased steadily with a notable peak around 2020, and recent years show continued interest. Drivers include technological advances and pandemic-driven digital learning needs, suggesting gamification is emerging as a meaningful role in special education research. When we map research focus, most studies sit in general gamification for education, while a growing subset targets neurodevelopmental disorders like ADHD and autism, and far fewer address dimension-specific executive function training. The trend points toward more diagnosis-aware designs, but also highlights an opportunity for targeted EFD interventions and clearer timelines for outcomes. Methodologies have evolved from small, quasi-experimental designs before 2015 to more mixed methods and longitudinal analyses after 2020, but evidence quality remains uneven. Broader educational settings often show stronger effects than EFD-specific interventions, so the big gap is the need for robust, targeted methodologies that can validate interventions for distinct executive function impairments. Here we outline practical engagement tactics. Reward sustained attention with points and badges, use short challenges to reduce cognitive load and keep motivation high, provide progress feedback for self-monitoring, adapt difficulty and choices to diverse learners, and align game goals with learning outcomes so engagement supports real academic progress rather than distraction. Targeted digital interventions for neurodevelopmental disorders adapt gamification mechanics to disorder-specific executive profiles. Studies aim to improve executive functions, cognitive skills, and assessment accuracy across diverse platforms, and findings suggest focused gamification increases relevance and effectiveness when mechanics are tuned to the cognitive profile of ADHD or autism, for example. The taxonomy summarizes platform examples. Astra's offers reward systems and progress tracking for executive deficits, Mobile ADHD uses time-based challenges and visual feedback. Virtual environments use story-driven missions to boost focus. And Fisherman integrates gamified inhibition tasks for assessment and therapy, showing a range of design purposes and usability considerations. Game-based assessments boost engagement and can capture nuanced executive metrics that standard tests miss. Approaches include gamified classic tasks for children and purpose-built serious games for older users, which may improve ecological validity and sensitivity to inhibition and planning, while also reducing test anxiety through interactive, motivating formats. Comparing gamified and standard assessments reveals trade-offs. Gamification increases engagement and practice effects, but adds complexity and potential confounds like gaming familiarity, creating standardization and interpretation challenges. These methods are promising across the lifespan, but we need more longitudinal research to validate extended applications and control for confounding variables. In math, gamified designs externalize cognitive processes to lower working memory load, provide real-time feedback to guide inhibitory control, and create motivating environments that support cognitive flexibility. These structured mechanics help multi-step problem solving and specifically support students with EFD by combining clarity, feedback, and persistence-building features into learning tasks. Combining AR, problem-based learning, and game mechanics can reduce cognitive load and boost strategy in math. AR layers digital guidance over physical objects to offload memory, game progress, and reward supply external motivation. Tangible visualizations make abstract math concrete, and storytelling reframes errors as learning steps to reduce anxiety and encourage strategy development. Designing gamification for math requires balancing motivation with cognitive demands. Use leaderboards and points for progress, but emphasize growth over competition, reward effort and strategy, rather than just correct answers. Recognize research gaps in EFD-specific math gamification, and plan to customize mechanics to mathematical subdomains and individual cognitive profiles. Intelligent tutoring systems combine adaptive AI with gamification to support learners with executive function differences by adjusting difficulty in real time, sustaining motivation via points and narrative progression, segmenting tasks to reduce executive load, and pacing challenges to support memory and engagement, ultimately personalizing support and maintaining sustained effort. Examples show programming its use points, badges, and leaderboards while adjusting difficulty to avoid frustration for EFD learners. Mathematics, its use narrative scenarios and progress visualizations to reduce cognitive load. And cross-domain impacts include externalized progress cues and personalized scaffolds that help sustain focus across subjects. EETs combined with gamification tackle EF deficits by chunking information to reduce working memory load, using varied activities and intermittent rewards to combat attention lapses, and structuring time challenges to support task initiation. Remaining issues include limited skill generalization beyond tutoring and the need to refine adaptation algorithms for individual EF differences to improve transfer. Emerging ITS research explores physiology-based adaptation using eye tracking or EEG to detect cognitive load, timed gamified supports that trigger interventions when metrics indicate need, and collaborative gamified ITS that form peer groups with complementary executive profiles. These directions promise richer personalized learning, but require rigorous validation and ethical safeguards. Gamification functions as a cognitive scaffold by making invisible executive processes visible and manageable. It supports task initiation, attention and working memory, extends cognitive load models by managing germane load, and uses narrative context to organize information. The implication is to design interventions that prioritize organizational narrative and meaningful engagement for learners with EFD. Customization matters. Align game mechanics with IEP goals to target time management, inhibitory control, or other specific deficits. Use modular gamification to tailor difficulty and reduce extraneous elements. Match design to individual needs to lower cognitive load. And note that case evidence shows the biggest benefits when interventions are personalized to the student. Current methodological limitations include short-term studies and small samples that limit insight into lasting efficacy, a geographic concentration in high-income countries that restricts global applicability, publication bias favoring positive outcomes, and diverse measurement methods that complicate synthesis. There is a clear need for standardized evaluation metrics to improve comparability. Future research should prioritize longitudinal mixed methods tracking of cognitive and educational outcomes, map which gamification components target specific executive impairments, study multiplayer dynamics for cooperative skill building, integrate physiological computing for real-time adaptation, test cultural adaptations, establish ethical safeguards, and promote cross-disciplinary collaboration for scalable, safe solutions. To conclude, tailored gamified learning externalizes cognitive processes, supports task initiation and monitoring, and offers practical pathways to improve executive function in the classroom. The most promising approaches target specific EFD deficits, but advancing impact requires long-term, culturally diverse studies, stronger methodological rigor, and careful translation from experiments into classroom practice.